looks like another animal, does it? Do you think a dog worries if it looks like a coyote? Or if it somehow resembles a cat in its motion sometimes? I mean, do you think a dog worries about that? No, we're people. We overthink everything. We overthink everything. Our brains are constantly this monkey that's stuck to us. And we're like, oh, I kind of feel like I'm moving more like a lion than a beetle. I don't know. And so we try to analyze all of it. That's the best part to shape-shifting, is that you can kind of let go of that thought process. Just try to feel everything. What's around it? We're not as agile as the animals in the kingdom a lot of the time. Part of that's because of our lifestyle. Getting outside more and moving helps a lot. Getting outside and pretending helps a lot. Sitting on your couch and watching the History Channel won't help you in moving like an animal. Sitting on your couch and watching other informational things. I'm not even going to say all this stuff like playing video games and other like stuff that's fun, but I mean the stuff that you might try to justify to me as valid for sitting for endless hours watching something because you are learning something from it. Be willing to imagine. You're going to learn more from imagining things than you can possibly get a grasp on. Oh, this is so cool. Try squirting ink.
A cow.
Oh, yes. Oh, good job. We got to clap for that one.
This is Sneaker Sneaker.
Everyone back up 3 steps.
Wait. Garrett, you're out. Wait, everybody has to freeze. Until Garrett sits down. Thank you. Continue. Gotcha, Morgan. Guys, you're out.
She caught you. I just said it. She tagged you. You're out. You're not saying broken. So you three are all out. Yeah, most you're out. Well, we'll see that.
Okay. Take off your blindfold, Chase.
Step on your pocket. On your pocket. I did this one right there. I did this one. I did this one. I did this one. Okay, check this one. I did this one right here.
Take your clothespins back.
There was mine was the first one. That is yes.
Hey guys, we have to keep in mind that there's another group of...
Okay, let's back up.
Remember the word freeze.
No. That was you, Morgan. You're still moving too fast. Ready? Go.
Can we freeze just for a second? I just want to tell you, Parker, there's a whole line of people on the top of the ridge, so you're going to be hearing them a little bit, so be aware of that. Okay.
Gotcha, Bobby. Okay, no freeze means you don't move. Ready, begin. No.
We have the kids gathering materials to build fires. They're getting tinder and kindling together. At this point, they know how to build their teepees so that they can start the fires a little bit easier, and we're going to see how it goes in the rain today.
And Keanu. Hi. Hey, she's been a good tour, right? Welcome. Maybe we'll have a number 1 match 5. Oh, whoa. If the ground is down.
Oh, I think we might get first place.
It's good.
Put more wood in.
Here. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's really hot.
Are those your sticks on that fire right now? It's nice.
Will.
Yeah?
Get away.
It's gonna burn.
Just leave it.
Burn.
Everybody hold their breath.
What if it doesn't break?
It will.
So close.
Sorry. Watch it.
Alright.
Snap. Come on, guys.
There you go.
2.
There
Oh,
you go.
1. Gotta turn red. Wait, not yet. It's gonna turn red. It's high quality.
This game is called Monsters in the Forest. Children are going to run pell-mell through the woods. We are going to try to make them monsters by catching them. It's actually a really good game in terms of helping them to understand that they don't have to really hurry to beat us. They just have to learn tactics about where to maneuver smartly. So we'll see how they do with that.
Hi. No. I'm scared. I'm not scared. I'm just following you. I have to go back to starting.
Good luck and go!
When we attack, do we have to go back to starting point?
No! Did you lose all of them? No, keep going! It's fun, isn't it? Poyashao grew, and he turned out to be a very good young man, about the age of 10 and 11. I don't remember which year she was talking about at the time when she told the story. He was old enough where he could be a helper to the family, to the household. And so she sent him out with a bow. She said, it's time for you to give back. I've given you a home. It's time for you to think about helping out. So I need you to go up. I want you to take some game, bring back some food so we have something to eat. That would give me one less thing to have to think about. And I would be very appreciative of that. So he took his bow, and he took his dried corn, which he wrapped up into a piece of rawhide, put it into his pouch, and took off. And he goes walking a little ways, and it doesn't take him long, and he starts to see a whole bunch of large game birds on the ground. And so, Poyashao happened to be a very natural, good archer. And so he started shooting at these birds and killing a pretty good number of them on the first day. He strung them up by their feet, he brought them all back, and he handed them. He says, Mother, look, this is what I have for us tonight. And she said, Poyashao, I'm very proud of you. You're now giving back to us, and I appreciate that. So she cooked them up after plucking them, and they ate them for supper. The next day, Poyashao went out again with his dried corn, his bow, and he went out a little bit farther, and he took twice as many birds as he had the day before. Enough so that she actually asked the neighbor in the shelter next door if they wanted to have some of them because it was too much. And she was very proud of him. She knew that he was a natural hunter. Poyashao went out like this for 10 days. And every day he came back with more and more birds. And he brought them to his mother and handed them to her. And she, at the end of the time, had to start bundling up by 3 or 4 birds and then passing them out to everyone else in the community. He was that good of a hunter at such a young age. So one day Poyashao was out wandering, and he went to fire at one of these ground birds, and the string snapped, broke, and he had to sit down and fix it. So he looks and he sees a little clearing. And there's a table rock. It's a very large rock with a flat top on it. And he walks over to this rock and he kind of bounces up on top of it and he unstrings the bow and he takes the sinew in his mouth and he softens it with his saliva, just kind of running it through his mouth, and gets ready to tie it back on again so he can use his bow. And as he's sitting there tying the string onto the bow, he hears someone ask, "Would you like to hear a story?" He stops and he looks around. Who is that? And he continues working. And the voice asks again, "Would you like to hear a story?" He stops and he looks around. He sees no one. And he says, "What is this story you speak of?" And then the voice continues and says, "Well, a story are the way things have always been. They're times that we tell about." And he realized then that the voice was coming from the rock he was sitting on. And the rock tells him, they're times about your ancestors, times of things forgotten, things to learn about, things to remember, lessons to hold into your heart. Would you like me to tell you a story? And Poi Shao said, "I would very much like to hear a story." And so the rock said, "Just lay your birds down over here on the ground next to me, and I will tell you." And so Poi Shao laid down on top of the rock, and he put the birds down, and he just listened as the rock told him stories until he saw it was getting dark, and then he said, "Oh, I better go home. Mother will be looking for me." So he jumps off the rock, and the rock says, "Come back again tomorrow. I will tell you more stories. Just bring some more game with you." So he goes off, and he realized all of a sudden that he was barehanded. And that might look kind of strange. So he shot a couple birds on the way back in, and he handed them to his mother, only about 5 or 6, much less than he had had the day previously. And she goes, "Was it a rough day?" And he said, "Well, I shot a lot of the birds close to here. I have to keep wandering farther to find it." And she says, "Oh, okay." So she takes the birds, prepared them. The next morning he got up again and went to go for his hunt. Except he didn't stop to go hunt. He walked straight out into the woods of that clearing as fast as he could go. And he found that rock that told the stories. And he shot just a couple birds along the way, just enough so he had something to put next to the rock. And as soon as he got there, he laid on top of it. And he said, "Okay, I'm ready. Will you tell me more stories?" And so he laid on top of it, and the rock told him stories all day long. This happened for about 3 days. And every day, Poi Shao would come back with just a couple of birds. His mother was concerned about this and picked another boy, an older boy in the tribe, to secretly follow him, to see what he was up to. So Poi Shao went out and he shot a couple birds, moving quite quickly again toward the clearing, and the other boy actually shot a couple birds as well on the way out. And then he kept his distance, and he saw when Poi Shao went into this clearing and then jumped on top of the stone. He laid his head down and listened. And the boy sat there because he saw Poi Shao's mouth not moving, but he heard someone talking. And so the boy walked out in the clearing and he says, "Who is talking to you?" The Poi Shao says, "It's the stone. It's telling me stories." And the boy said, "What are these stories?" And he says, "Lay down your birds and listen. You'll find out." And the boy did, and he laid on the rock and listened with Poi Shao for the whole rest of the day until it became almost dark, and they both went back, shot a couple birds, and they came back, and Poi Shao handed them to his mother. The mother secretly went and spoke to this other boy who had kind of spied on him and said, "What happened? Why doesn't he have many birds? Is he giving them to someone?" And the boy said, "No, there just aren't many birds between here and wherever we have to go. We have to keep walking farther to find them." The mother was not pleased by this answer, so she decided to try to speak to a couple adults to see if they would follow the boys. And so, the next day, when both boys left together to go hunt, and instead beelined it for the storytelling stuff, shot a couple birds, and then the older gentleman followed them into the woods, and he stayed right with them. They stayed right with them, and then they're standing on the outside of the clearing, and they see the boys lay their game down next to the stone, then jump on top of the stone. and be silent, but they still heard a voice coming. And so the gentleman came out and they said, "Who's talking to you?" And Poyashao sits up, he goes, "Stone is telling stories. If you would like to hear it, leave some of your game and they will tell them." And so the grown men came up next to the stone and they leaned in and they all four listened to stories. And at the end of the day, when it was becoming dark, the stone said, "It's getting late. It's time for you to go back, and it's time for all of your people to hear these stories. Things that have been forgotten, things that need to be passed down, to remember the nature of things as they're supposed to be. Come back tomorrow. Tell everyone to bring something. Send the men ahead to clear this spot out, and everyone needs to bring some food, something to offer. Because I'm going to tell you stories all day." And so Poyashao went back and he told the chief that everyone was expected to return to the stone and tell these stories. And the men and the other young boy stood with him and confirmed that this story was true. So the next day, the entire tribe got up and they had their food prepared, and the men walked ahead and they cleared the whole area around the stone so they all could sit around it. And when they got there, they laid all their food down next to the stone. And they sat and listened as the stone said, "There are histories and times that have been forgotten, things that have not been passed down. And there are things that need to be remembered. I'm going to tell you these stories. And you will listen. You will remember. Some of you will remember better than others. Some of you will remember every single word. Others of you will only remember the general idea of the story and tell it in that way. Others of you will only remember that a story was heard and have no idea what it was about and recall that. All of that is fine. Everyone has a different ability with listening and telling the stories. But no matter what, you'll feel the story inside of you." So they all sat and listened to these stories being told. And they did this for 3 days. And finally, the storytelling stone at sunset on the final day looked at all of them and said, "That is all of the stories that I have. I've told you everything I know about what's come before you, everything that for you to remember and pass down to those who come next. But remember that stories are something precious. Remember that stories remind you about the laws of the world and nature. And remember that stories are as important to you, if not more important to you, than sometimes your food or the things that you have around you. And therefore, if you want them and you're asking for them, you should offer something for them. If you really want a story from someone, you should come up and be prepared to give them something, some bit of bread, some bit of meat, something to offer as thanks, because stories are precious. And if you have nothing, just be willing to sit there and wait and be with them until someone is ready to tell the story and absorb as much as you can, because this is the only way everyone is going to find out about the world that came before." And so to this day, we've been telling stories. And to this day, people are still listening to stories. And to this day, stories hold just as much importance as they always have. Aho.